Mr. Mark, we are ready for you, sir. The floor is yours. Go for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nolan. Super happy to be here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get that going. Can everyone see my screen okay? It says you can, so I am going to I'm going to assume it is right. So my name is Mark Takata. I am the technical evangelist for ColdFusion for Adobe. And I've been a ColdFusion developer on and off for more than 20 years, as well as other programming languages. I do some design, some UX, some technical writing. I'm all over the map. But these days I'm doing evangelism for Adobe for ColdFusion and having a ton of fun with that. And today I'm going to be talking about kind of a little, it's a little bit off the beaten path, but I think it represents what could be the future of development in some ways, and that is using ColdFusion with no-code platforms or low-code platforms in some cases, and I'll talk a little bit about those, the differences between those two things, and GraphQL as well. So I'm loading up in this one with a lot of really fun stuff. So I'm going to kind of like not do the whole like take over my whole screen because my screen is ginormous and I apologize. It's probably looking very weird on everyone's screens. But let's start off with like, so what is no code and also like what is low code, right? And to understand what low code and no code really are, it actually helps to think about what programming actually is at a high level abstracted way. And so really what programming is taking logic and wrapping structure around that logic and then chaining those things together to solve a problem, which, if someone described it to you, that doesn't really mean anything to you. But as a programmer, you can think about that and say, oh, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense, right? Like you take your logic blocks in there and then in whatever language you have, the syntax is always different, of course. And then you have a problem you need to solve, so you chain those together in your code, and voila, you solve a problem. So no code takes that and essentially takes the structure and puts it into a very rigid graphical user interface, generally, methodology, where you have all of your pieces, your blocks that you need to put together to solve a problem, and you can kind of like drag and drop those into place and have them do the thing that you need them to do. And it's very rigid, but it's actually a really powerful tool to allow people who don't know programming, but might know logic, to build an application or integration or even do automation. And so what you end up seeing is, okay, well, that's great, but then you might have some limits on what that particular platform can do. Of course, that's why there's literally thousands of platforms growing up. There's hundreds now, there will be thousands. And so that's when you get into low code, which is a very similar thing where you can drag things in place, but then you can also customize them as well. And like I said, you can build things like data entry, you can build websites. Now, one of the most popular low code / no code platforms out there is one that doesn't really come up a lot because it doesn't get much respect, but it's paid a lot of bills for a lot of people, and that's WordPress, right? If you really think about what makes WordPress successful and makes WordPress work, is that you don't actually need to know how to program to build fairly complex applications with it. And Drupal's the same way. You can just build little logic blocks and chain them together and use plugins that other people have developed and integrate them all into a whole. It's kind of like baking a cake. You're putting in layers and you're putting in fruit and you're putting on frosting, and then voila, you have a cake at the end of it, right? So that's great. But why would you use no code, right? Like, and really the answer for a lot of us programmers is we probably wouldn't. Now, having said that, I've done a lot of WordPress development in my life, mostly because it's very fast to do, and people like having sites built with it because there's lots of WordPress developers, so it's easy to find someone to take it over. But having said that, would I go out and build, use no code to build something? Well, maybe. It really depends on what it is. And what you're going to end up seeing, and that's today, right? And this is kind of the Wild West. There are so many platforms doing so many things, and they're rising up and then blowing up and disappearing into the dust. But you're seeing a lot of the big players. Microsoft has their own low-code platform. Salesforce does, right? So all of these companies have these things, and it really allows you to extend your capabilities and allow what I like to call like citizen developers to build out extremely useful integrations without really needing to know how to program. Because let's face it, it takes a little bit of time to get up to speed in learning how to program in a language. And then there's all of the housekeeping that goes along with programming in a language, right? You need to learn how to use Git. You have to learn the software development lifecycle. You have to learn what the code actually looks like right now, because none of us are going to greenfield, right? Like you pretty much arrive at a new job and there's lots of code that's already been written. There's a lot of technical debt. You need to learn how to handle that. So as programmers, that's our bread and butter. It's why we get paid what we get paid, right? But you also have this class of, and citizen developer, I don't know that I really like that term necessarily, because it kind of, it belittles in some ways the capabilities that I've seen some people have. People that I know have done things, for example, with Excel that have blown my mind, right? And that's actually a really great example of a low-code platform that very few people think of as a low-code platform, and it doesn't get mentioned very often, but it absolutely is. It's capable of creating really complex, extremely powerful applications that go beyond what Excel originally was designed to do, which is, just a spreadsheet that can do a few things here and there. And then, of course, there's integrations with it that make it even more powerful, especially when you then take Microsoft's Power Tools and their low-code platform that can integrate with it, and then you can tie that into their entire stack. So you can do a lot of really amazing things. The other reason that you might want to incorporate a low-code platform, and the demos that I'm going to be showing here, by the way, kind of are going to demonstrate a good use case for this. And this is something that I call asymmetric complexity. I don't know if there's another name for it. I just made that up because it seemed to make sense. And what is asymmetric complexity? So asymmetric complexity just means that when you look at a whole application, right, the whole darn thing, there's a lot of it that is significantly more complex than the other parts of it, right? It does not look homologous across the entirety of it, right? There's no disrespect to UI UX. Obviously, there's a lot of complexity and difficulty in creating an extremely good UI UX, but I'm just talking about once that's been developed, putting together things like forms, like form fields, to take data in, not really that hard necessarily, right? But of course, when those form fields live inside of the entirety of an application, there's complexities that begin to show up. You have to use the same CSS, you have to check it in, check it out. It has all of these things, right? So, so wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be kind of cool if you could take things like data entry and allow someone who's a citizen developer, someone who is maybe not a programmer themselves, but understands logic, understands what's needed. And this is especially important because sometimes these people are the people working as business analysts, highly technical business analysts, that are very close to the problem domain, right? We live in the solutions domain. They live much more in the problem domain. And so they have a better understanding oftentimes of what really needs to be done. And I have a whole talk on bridging that gap as a developer that I could do some other time. But that's really a powerful thing to have in your pocket. And if you combine that with capability to create a usable production-ready front end to take data in, to then be used by other parts of the application that are more complex, I mean, that's pretty awesome. So what's like, I already mentioned a few application, no-code application builder examples, but here's a few more, right? So there's Salesforce, as I mentioned, has one. Zapier is one that's out there. Webflow, IFTTT, if this then that, is a very, very popular automation tool, which also is a no-code application builder. It really does help you integrate a number of different apps together by passing data between them and having one trigger actions in another one. So it's a really good example of the integration style of no code. Typeform is another one, but the one I'm going to talk about today is something called Airtable. And probably you've heard of Airtable. It's one of the most famous no code, and this kind of sits in that gray area of no code, low code. You can definitely do a whole Airtable implementation without writing a single line of code, but you can also develop for it as well. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And so what is it? What's Airtable? So it's a spreadsheet online in the cloud, but it's also a database, which I know that's kind of like like calling a spreadsheet a database is kind of a dirty word, but it really does have the capability to do relational data inside of Airtable. It's very, very powerful for what it is, and it's very easy to use. And it's free for basic use. There are paid versions of it out there, and to get some of the capabilities that, and unfortunately, some of the capabilities we'll be using today, full disclosure, the free version is actually not enough. It's not very expensive, although it does actually add up. Anyway, and the reason I chose Airtable to do this demo and to build stuff off of is because just right out of the box, they actually expose an API for it. So over here on the right side of my screen, this is what Airtable looks like. And let me remove this out of the way. So as you can see, it kind of looks like a spreadsheet, right? And what you're not seeing, which is really kind of nice, because a lot of the really advanced features are kind of hidden away, and it's a really nice thing. So this is a column, and you can think of it, by the way, as a column in a database. Now, columns in databases have types, right? So what can we do here? So if you can actually go in and change what type each column is, right? Which, of course, you could do that in a spreadsheet as well. However, there's a few things in here that are maybe a little bit more than what you can do in a spreadsheet. Hold on, let me see if I can find. So, and by the way, this is a slightly annoying feature, I'm calling it feature, of Airtable, and that is that the very first column is kind of special. And it's special because it is in some ways an identifying column, in that what'll happen is if you take data from there and display it in like a form or something, and there's not enough room, it will actually display just that line. So a lot of us who make our first column an ID, it's not great to do that here, right? Because you'll just end up with an ID as the name of the column or something along those lines, right? And it's a little bit weird. It takes a little bit of getting used to. What you need to keep in the back of your head is that behind the scenes here, and you'll see this when I dump out some of this data like raw to the screen, there is actually a row ID that's generated. It's a GUID that Airtable generates. It's guaranteed. It's guaranteed to be unique. You can't really use it to format, like you can't sort by it, because it's not necessarily guaranteed that one is going to be larger than another one. And so if you do need to sort, you will want to create like an auto number sort column somewhere in your data so you can sort by that. But I wanted to point out one thing here, and that is if you go into any of the other columns, other than the first one, and try to change the type, the very first thing there is link to another record. And essentially what that is, it's creating a foreign key relationship to another table that you can also create. So you can create multiple tables here. You can actually create tables that are descriptive, that are lookup tables. You can create linking tables if you want to, and connect them all together, which is really, this is where Airtable is just significantly superior to something like Google Sheets or even Excel, right? This is just a capability that I haven't really seen anyone do in some of these other ones. So anyway, I didn't do that here because I wanted to keep this demo kind of simple. And so one thing I did want to show is, so when you went in and created, so I created like a to-do list. And these are all the things that I need to do, right? So I created an item name, I created a notes field. This is a Boolean here, right? And let's say I wanted then to have a form somewhere that I could have people input data here. So what I can do is I can actually just go, and actually, let me just create a new one. I'm going to create a new view. And by the way, what I'm doing here is totally non-destructive. When you're creating these views, it's doing nothing to the data itself, right? So if I delete this or move things around, it's not going to change anything in the data itself. And so this kind of this just created a form, and you can see you can add a logo, a cover image, you can actually style some of this stuff, but it's pretty basic, right? And what that will end up doing is exposing a front end that you can style, and you can get rid of the Airtable logo if you pay, of course. And so now if I go in here and say,
Hey,
let's see, do talk at SAC Interactive. Yay, I like talks. And I'm not calling it done yet because I'm still doing it. I'm still in the middle of it. So I can submit that. Yay, I submitted the form. Now if I actually go back here and go back to my grid view, there it is. Do a talk at SAC Interactive. Yay, I like talks, and it was not done. And now, of course, I can go in here and change this. I can edit any of this data. It works just like a spreadsheet online. But for new entries, you can expose a form. So that's pretty darn powerful, right? Now, of course, there's always the issues of how do you integrate that into your production your production systems. I'll leave that to I'll leave that to people with because it's always different. Everybody's production environments are different, but you can always point people to things like that. So I'm going to close that, and now what I want to show you is one of the best. So this is the second best feature. Actually, this is the best feature of Airtable, because the best feature out of this whole demo actually comes from one of the plugins. But this right here, what you're seeing is the documentation for the Airtable API. So the way that you would get here normally is you'd go api.airtable.com. You'd come here and you'd have to log in. I'm already logged in, so it already knows my workspace. CF Summit demo is my workspace. I'm going to click on that. And now what you are seeing here is actually a customized documentation set for your particular site. So everything in here is actually dynamically being pulled from your Airtable. Like laundry dot, like these are items, these are notes, these are, whether things are done or not, which is a Boolean, which is done. But anyway, yeah, it's true or false stuff. They've got example requests, right? Really, really, really cool stuff in here. Now, to pull stuff back, by the way, from this does require an authentication key. And I'm not going to be showing you that because last time I had to reset everything because I had it recorded. But what I'm going to show you is how, is how you might actually grab data from this API. So just starting off here, this is index.cfm, and this is in the no code area. And by the way, my code is total trash, so feel free to trash me later. I'm sure I'm going to hear it from Nolan, like, why didn't you make a CFC out of that? Well, because I was working on this, and it's funny. Me and Nolan were talking earlier about, hey, I'll be working on it until the last minute. Well, it actually turns out I ended up having an old demo here from a different Airtable, which I no longer have access to. And so I tried to refactor it in 20 minutes and mostly failed. So yes, I got enough to show you some fun stuff in it, but it was really funny that he had mentioned that. Anyway, so this is going to be a place where we're going to drop all of our data that we go and get. You can see there's like a blank table with item notes and whether something's done. And then we've got data tables, right? And we're going to go and hit getData.cfm. Now, for whatever reason, I couldn't actually get this to work for the API version. I did get this to work for my GraphQL. My only excuse is I'm on like a new low inflammation diet and I am very fuzzy of head. So apologies. But so what does getData.cfm look like? It's very easy, right? So I use, and this is where ColdFusion comes in. Yay! CFHTTP. I went out and I hit this URL. And as you can, if you kind of look in here, so let's deconstruct this, right? So we're hitting api.airtable.com. It's versioned, which is nice. There's versions, so you can actually version your app. And then this right here is actually this is not your API key. This is your site ID, okay? And then this right here, and I don't know what made me like choose to name it table space 1. It's really dumb of me. But anyway, I named it table space 1. So table %21 is the actual table I'm hitting. And then at that point, you will pass in your API key. And your API key, you actually, I'm not going to show you my API key, but I'll show you where you get it from. You would get it from when you're in here. Your API key is right inside of here. You would just click on that and copy it. You can always regenerate them and delete them if you need to. Boop. Oh, why did that move? Silly computer. Okay. And then, the method is get, and then I put it into a result. Now here's, there's a lot of deserialization and serialization. I was trying to get this to basically massage the JSON return into something that data tables would not just, like roll its eyes at me and not do anything with. I didn't quite get it to do that. So yeah, it rolled its eyes and did not actually dump out anything that I could put into data tables. But what it did dump out is this. So this is the JSON return from the API of the Airtables no-code table that I built earlier with all of the data that I would need to generate basically a website, right? You got everything here. You can loop through this and you wouldn't have to obviously use data tables. I was just doing it because, I don't know, I'm lazy. And it worked really well on the GraphQL example, which I'll show you in a bit. But as you can see here, it's actually returning an ID, right? If you look in here, there's no ID. There's this column, which is just a row count, but this is not actually showing you an ID. But an ID does exist. It gets generated with every single line. And you can use that to basically to change, you can update rows, you can do everything. So that's the really cool thing about this is this API is basically, it's a CRUD interface, right? You can go in and you could insert new ones, you could delete, you could update, you could do everything you wanted to using ColdFusion using that API. So really what you've built is a front end that you can use to design things, a front end to take that data in, and then automatically in the back end, an API is generated for you that a programmer could then get access to, which I don't know about you. I saw that, I was like, that is so cool. So also you can get things like created time, you know, so these are all things that just get automatically generated, plus all the actual data like notes, item, all that. Okay, so that's Airtable. What about GraphQL? Now, GraphQL, I actually did not get to really dive in and get to know GraphQL really until probably last month, maybe November, when I really started digging in to begin to learn the language. And full disclosure, this entire talk with the GraphQL component, like, was built because I had heard that there was a plugin for Airtables that allowed you to expose the API as GraphQL. And I thought, wow, that is such a cool feature. I've never heard of any other type of integration like that, right? I mean, you can run obviously the Java GraphQL like jar and instantiate it, and it's just like a huge pain in the butt to actually get that to work. But here, theoretically, I didn't know how it was going to work. It just does it for you, and it's kind of magic. And as it turns out, it is magic, but some of it is dark magic. The best kind, I'm sure. And yeah, anyway, backing up a little bit. So what is GraphQL? Because some of you might be going, you keep saying GraphQL, but I don't know what GraphQL is. So GraphQL is actually a query language. That's what the QL is, which structures your query to look like the result that you're wanting to get back, which seems like kind of an obvious thing to say and an obvious concept. But if you think about, like, I don't know, SQL, what does SQL look like? Well, it certainly does not look like what you get back, right? It looks like SQL. It's a totally separate programming language abstracted away from the data that you end up getting back. And, you know, you can get the data back in all kinds of different formats, right? You can get it back in XML, you can get it back as a query in it's like a query struct in ColdFusion anyway, and JSON, you can ask it for JSON as well. But GraphQL is very, very, very specific to getting back JSON as your query result. That is what it's designed to do. And I believe it was designed, I want to say it was Facebook that made it. It was one of the really big companies. They were the ones that kind of got GraphQL started and the idea fomented there. And it is an open source project now, so you don't have to worry about supporting some big bad guy somewhere. But the idea was that they moved so much data that they wanted a way to increase efficiencies, right? And if you're moving, I don't know, a petabyte of data every single day, a 1% increase, or even a 0.5% increase in efficiency is a lot of data. And that means money, right? So one of the things that GraphQL does is it allows you to very, very tightly filter down your results so that you only get back from your query the thing that you need in that moment. It's kind of amazing. It does take a little bit of getting used to because it seems kind of like I can't really work that way, can it? But it does. So, okay, how do you then use, because that's GraphQL, it's nothing to do with Airtable. How do you use GraphQL over here with Airtable? So there is someone built an app, they call it an app, which is essentially a plugin for Airtables called BaseQL. The reason I don't know why it's not Airtable QL. Bases are what you call tables in Airtable, so that's the only thing I can think of. They were like matching it off that. So to get BaseQL itself is free. You don't have to pay for it. However, big big but here, to use it easily, to just integrate it easily into Airtable, you do have to be running at least the Pro Airtable plan, which I want to say, I don't know, it's like 29 bucks a month, something like that. It's not like super cheap. That's per seat. So again, yeah, kind of a lot. But you could get a lot of efficiency out of it. And they do have, I think, like a 15-day free trial, which doesn't require a credit card for once. Awesome. So if you want to try it out, you can just say, sure, sign me up for the free trial. At the end of the 15 days, it'll just stop working. No muss, no fuss. If you don't want to, if you're like, well, okay, I learned what I needed to learn, I'm good, then you can just keep doing whatever you're doing and you're fine. And really all it does, all it does is it exposes the API from Airtables as a GraphQL endpoint, which is actually pretty awesome. So let's take a look real quick. So basically, oh, you just saw my API key. Okay, well, Mark will be resetting his API key later. Good job, Mark. Boing. You can edit that out, right? So the way that you would do this is you would go in here, you'd hit apps under Airtable, and you'd hit add an app. You'd search for BaseQL. You'd go into your account. You'd pull your API key, cut and paste it in here. And then what you would do is you'd hit open in BaseQL. And you would get this page. And this is the coolest thing that I have in this whole demo. Basically, if you want to learn how to write GraphQL queries, this little magic app here will help you do that. And you might say, oh, sure, Mark. Yeah, no, it's just whatever. It's just a web page. No. I learned everything I know about GraphQL pretty much mostly from this magic little app. So what do we have here? We have an Explorer, which automatically, by the way, since I was logged into Airtable and I clicked the link over and it had my API key, it actually made the connection already over to my table, which is table 1. I thought there was a space in. Oh, I guess they removed this. Oh, right. Yeah. GraphQL, by the way, has a few very strange things in it. Like it will do things like replace underscores by like camel casing things. Anyway, it does really weird things, and it does remove spaces in your names too. So that's super fun. So on the Explorer, you've got the table already attached. And what I'm asking it right now for is to pull back the done, the ID, the item, and the notes. And it builds your query here, which kind of looks like JSON in some ways, kind of, sort of. And then you hit that, and you get back JSON. So I don't know. When I first saw that, I sort of fell over like dead because it seemed so easy and so amazing. Like, really, it's that easy? Well, yeah, it really is that easy. So then let's do some filtering. So then I would just click ID, and I would cut and paste that ID, and it automatically generates. This is how you filter. And you click it, and boom, you get the filtered result data. So super cool, right? And you can just cut and paste this into ColdFusion. No, you can't. I wish you could. And I'm working on it. Trust me. I am working on making this just a cut and paste type of deal. Unfortunately, this is where things get a little bit, this is where the dark magic begins to happen, because there's really no native way to just take a GraphQL query and put it into, I don't know, a CF GraphQL block in ColdFusion and have it run. There isn't. Which I was very disappointed when I saw there was no like CF query type GraphQL. Nope, doesn't exist. But what does exist is the ability to pass a body into an endpoint using CFHTTP. So here's what you need to do to do that. So, and by the way, all this code is up on my my GitHub, and there's going to be another piece of code which Nolan alluded to. I actually did a little bit of work earlier and actually got this to run. It wasn't like the API thing that I messed up earlier. So this basically you build a string. So I just set this value, and you can kind of see. Hold on, let me pop this over to the left side of the, and hopefully everyone can see my screen. It's not too small on your monitor, but if I take out that and you look at what the query looks like here, right? So you can kind of see that there's similarities, right? So there's the word query. There's something called my query, okay? And then there's table 1, and then all of the different fields. However, it's not structured exactly this way. And the reason for that is that GraphQL is actually a very smart interface. It just kind of like when you're passing something to it directly using an interface like this, it kind of knows things. It drinks it, it knows things. But here we have to structure it in a little bit a more controlled way so that it really, really knows exactly what's going on. So what you have to do is you have to put query separate here, and you don't have to name it. So in here, you actually name your query. I was unable to get that to work using CFHTTP. I don't know why. It doesn't really end up mattering because you can just put the results into any variable you want because it's CFHTTP. So what I do is I build that query. I use a URL, which is here, and you can see that this is another really cool thing. So the endpoint for this particular place, and by the way, it's different. You can kind of notice it's different here than what you saw before. Like before, there was like a version, right? There was your table name. There were all these other things. Like none of that exists here. Like this is just an endpoint for this particular table, done and done. The other thing you'll notice is the method is post. So method is post here. You're actually posting something to it and returning something back, right? And just for poops and chuckles, I named the result GraphQL. Yay. And then what else do you need to pass it? So there's a couple of headers which a lot of endpoints need: content type and accept, and both of those in this case are application JSON. Okay, because it's structured as JSON when it goes in, and it's structured as JSON when it comes back. And that's actually one of the differences. So there is a data type called application GraphQL, which is what this structure is, I believe. I haven't been able to test it outside of this, but I'm pretty sure that's true. However, because of the way that CFHTTP works and all that, you have to pass it in as JSON, which is why you have to play all these games with how you structure it. And then you pass in a body to it. And what's the value of the body? Well, the value of the body that you're posting to it is actually your query, your GraphQL query. So you'll get that back. And that looks like this, right? So this is your data that's coming back in table 1, right? You've got all your items and IDs and all that good stuff. Now you'll notice there's some things missing here. For example, the created date, right? And that's because I didn't ask it for it, right? On the other API, it just kind of gives you everything, right? You hit that endpoint, and that's what you get. You get it all. With GraphQL, of course, you don't. That's part of the magic of it. So now, if I take this and drop it into, close that out. Okay. So if I drop it into, this is very familiar, I am sure. You've got your table to hold things in. And all I'm doing here is I am just hitting that endpoint, which should be a CFC. I know, Nolan, I'm sorry. I didn't have a lot of time. Well, actually I did, but I didn't fix it. I didn't make it nice. And the data source is table 1, which is the main structure of that here. And then those are the data points, and they just get dropped into here, and blammo, here we are. We've got all of the data that we want inside of your data table. And if you wanted to, you could use this to, search through it and pull whatever you want back. However, also, if you wanted to actually do a dynamic query, we can do that too. So let me show you what that looks like. And here's where things get just really annoying with it. This is a big reason why we just need some kind of native interface for it. So as you saw earlier, if I wanted to, for example, if I wanted to say make the item dog walk, right? This is what it would look like. There would be, parens, item, colon, and then quotes. Well, this is, wait a minute, don't do that. Okay, this is where we kind of run into a problem, because we're already creating a string which has one quote, and then we've got more quotes, but then we would need another set of quotes inside of those. And so, yeah, what you end up having to do is, and it's not a big deal. I mean, we've all escaped quotes, but to do this just regularly in production, having to escape quotes constantly to do custom, to do any kind of like custom queries, I mean, you're just setting yourself up for failure. We need some way to do this that doesn't require you to drop in that way. But let me go ahead and save this and pop back over to, where'd it go? Yes. So now if I pull that back, it pulls back just the one item. Of course it does, because now I'm actually querying that one item. Okay, so that's cool. So that's the R of CRUD. And this was actually the end of my, let's see. Yeah, that was actually the end of my last demo, but I got one more thing for all of you. So earlier today, I actually did a stream on Twitch. By the way, I do that stream every Wednesday at 1 p.m. at twitch.tv/MarkTakata. I do all kinds of crazy things. Like today, I decided to add an insert into the GraphQL code that I had for this demo. And this is the thing that is not currently in GitHub. It'll be up there later today. And so, okay, how do you actually do it so that you can change something that's up there? Because reading, okay, that's great, but what about doing something else? So let's go ahead, and what they call it is a mutation, right? So, and by the way, to actually make this work, you do have to go into the settings of your base QL and turn mutations on. By default, mutations are turned off. It's read-only data completely. You can't actually change it through the API interface. I mean, mostly done probably for security, but also so that maybe you can, your input is always the Airtable, and then you're just reading back out of it. But of course, we'd like to do other things like delete and edit and insert new records, probably using our own stuff too. So you can turn that on. Hold on. Okay, so this was our old query. I'm going to delete that. So the mutations are delete, insert, update, right? So this is the CUD, CRUD. So let's say I want to insert, and I want to insert everything. right? Now you would think, okay, I want to insert everything, so I'm gonna grab these at the bottom because that's what we did when we were reading stuff back. The other things were just filtering. Aha, well, that's not actually what you want. You do need one of these because one of the sort of interesting things, and I like it as a feature, but it did like throw me for a loop, is you need to always get a return even when doing a mutation. And that's kind of awesome because it lets you know, for example, if you insert, what the ID of the new inserted thing is. You don't have to like do a top whatever stupid thing or or pull back the data in some other way. Every database has a way of getting that data. Here it's just built in. So what you can do, let's say I want to insert something and I want to insert all the fields, right? So this is what it's going to look like in GraphQL. So this is the GraphQL version of what this is going to look like. So let's put in, actually don't need, I don't need an ID. And by the way, the ID is automatically put in. I guess potentially you could do it yourself. I haven't tried to see if I can write into it. I would imagine that it wants to make sure that that field is unique. So you probably can't do that. But I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, let's see, what's a thing I haven't done yet? And I'll climb Mount Everest. Haven't done that quite yet. And notes, yeah, lots of steps. Yay, Fitbit. And I haven't done it yet, so it's false. So I'm going to run this. And now if I go back here, there it is. Climb Mount Everest, lots of steps, yay, Fitbit. So I have now done an insert using GraphQL under BaseQL. Rad, right? So, right, you just copy and paste this into ColdFusion, right? Yeah, I really wish that was the case. It's not the case, and this thing took me 2.5 hours to figure out exactly how you have to do it. So this is what that, and let me have them both side by side here so that you can see it. Oh, where's my, oh, why are you so wide? Sorry. Boop. Okay, so here it's saying it's a mutation, and then it names it. And then it says insert underscore table 1, which confused the heck out of me originally because I was like, that doesn't actually exist. What is that? And then you put in your data, and then you pull in this right here is the thing you want to get back. So generally speaking, you want to pull back the ID because that's the thing most of us want to know when we're actually putting stuff back. However, the cool thing is here, if you wanted to display like you just inserted a record with these things or whatever, you can pull back everything and then just display that in a data table or whatever you want to do. So that's not what this looks like, unfortunately. It's still called a query, which, boy, that was very confusing because I was like, but I'm not really querying, I'm mutating, and everywhere else inside of GraphQL, you choose either a mutation or a query. Well, apparently when you pass it in this way, it does have to be a query. Then you identify it as a mutation. Aha. So that's where this comes in. And this is actually something that, so the insert underscore is an automated, like I said, GraphQL is very smart. So when it says when it sees insert underscore, it knows that the mutation that you want to do is an insert on table 1 is the name of the table. And then you pass in the data that you want to actually write. Now you'll see, of course, I have the ColdFusion values for the things, and I'm going to show you this. There's it's a form field that I built myself. Yay, super hard. And you just kind of pass in the stuff. As you can see, yeah, you have to escape. You have to escape the quotes inside of this. There's no getting around that. You're sort of stuck with that. And then the return ID is here inside of another set of brackets, which doesn't exist in the actual GraphQL. So what does that look like? Not there, here. Okay, so this is actually a form, which is this form. Here, and simple form, it's passing into itself I put in a hidden thing to make sure that it triggers. I mean, you can do this like a billion different ways. This is just a way that I did it this morning because I was trying to get it done. And I'm passing in, item text, notes, and then whether it's done. So let's put in an item, I don't know, paint portrait of an eagle. I don't know. Why not? Like, yay, freedom. Okay. And I haven't done that yet, surprisingly. Then I'm going to say create new to do. Now, I knew this was going to get me. Hold on. Let me change this. Oops. Back. Boop. Kidding. Okay. And here it is. Paint a portrait of an eagle. Now, you'll notice, wait a minute, this is not in the order that it was put in. Yeah, exactly. So this is, I think, attempting, it's trying to order it by the ID column and failing spectacularly because that ID column is not actually sortable. Anyway, there you go. It inserted it into our database using GraphQL. So that is the new thing that only all of you got to see. No one else at CF Summit got to see that. So, and I'll be uploading that code later for you all to look at right after I regenerate my API key. So no one hacks me.
Mark, I'll blur that out of the recording too, by the way.
Oh, love you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I trust all of you that are here, but nobody else. You guys are on my team. But, so that's the end of my talk. Here's all my content on how to contact me, my email, my Twitter, my Twitch, my GitHub, my LinkedIn. I'm on CFML Slack as Mark Takata Adobe. These daily office hours are actually changing. This is actually just going to be Monday. So nobody was showing up to my office hours. So I'm trying to get my time back. So if a lot of you start showing up for office hours, I'll start to extend them back out. That being said, does anyone have questions, comments, all that stuff? I'm going to stop my share here, and I can put that back up if you want the if you want all that content later.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. This is kind of, I get unreasonably excited about this kind of.
Bill, it is so cool. It's so, I mean, this is my like excited face. When I saw that you could do this stuff, I was like over the moon. And I was like, please let this work with ColdFusion.
I'm curious why it took, 2 hours to figure out some of that syntax. Is the documentation just not very good, or?
There's no docs. There's no docs whatsoever. So basically, they expect if you're passing in stuff into GraphQL that you are using some kind of actual GraphQL, like application GraphQL. So they're expecting you to copy and paste actual GraphQL code, not make it fit into a JSON. So essentially what you're doing is you're serializing, you're like JSONifying the GraphQL, and it's smart enough to figure out what you're doing. But I actually had to look up, I think people were using Postman to do this. And so I had to sit there and I had to like, okay, this is how you mutate. This is how you do it in Postman. And some of the stuff, I literally just change this. Nope. Change it. Nope. Change it. Nope. for like a really long time. Also, again, my brain is fuzzy and I'm, like not a very good developer to begin with. So
it's frustrating when these services don't have the documentation that you need. That's, what you were saying at the beginning about there being just so many different platforms out there, and which ones are going to survive and which ones aren't. And I think that documentation's a thing.
It is. And the docs for Airtable are amazing. I love them. The docs for BaseQL, which is, again, it's a plugin that somebody wrote, some team somewhere wrote, which I don't think they're actually continuing to develop it. They just kind of thought it'd be a neat thing to put in, and it works, so they just don't really care about it. It's minimal. There's just like very little, because they figure, well, you already know GraphQL, and you're using some sort of GraphQL engine somewhere to do this stuff, so you already know what you're doing. And I'm like, no, I really don't.
Have you looked at Notion at all? I'm loving Notion, and they now have exposed an API, and they have a similar table setup as Airtable.
I might have. My wife and her team at this, so she works for the state. She works for the Delta Science Stewardship Council, and they use something. I don't know if it's Notion, but it's really neat, and I almost use that instead. But it's like Airtable, but like powered up. Like you can drag and drop an image into a column, and it automatically figures out that it's an image and creates an image column, and you can like add notes that are connected to it. I don't know if that's Notion, but
probably is Notion.
Yeah, it was really cool, and I didn't realize they had an API at the time when I asked. Well, of course, I asked her. She goes, "AP what?" All right, she didn't know what the heck I was talking about. And I had actually used Airtable with my team to build a customer relationship management tool, like right when I joined Adobe, because I don't know, I didn't want to bother someone for a Salesforce license.
The other one I've been playing around with is Back for App. Have you looked at that? Has anybody looked at that one at all?
I have not, but there's so many of them. It's so amazing.
Yeah,
it's
Back for App is kind of a competitor to, like Google Firebase. And I was really getting frustrated. I'd done a talk here at SAC Interactive about Google Firebase, and I've since become very frustrated with it, partially because of the poor documentation from Google, sadly, partially because it's becoming less and less clear as to how much data you consume before you start getting charged with any of the Google products. And they're starting to, want you to put in credit cards and stuff like that, just in case you go over your limits. And like they're going in these places that I just don't really want to go for the dorky little things that I'm making. And,
I saw a talk. It was a woman who's a Google DevRel, who's super awesome. She kind of makes games, and she did a demo where she had a button that she would press that used Firebase that then lit up a light on the table next to it, right? Which seemed like a lot to do for, obviously just a demo, right? But she told a story about somebody who had, and it was kind of like a be careful when you're using Firebase, because this team had used Firebase and I think they were logging something using, I don't know what they were doing, but their first bill was $30,000.
Oh,
yeah. And they were like, what? Right. And they were doing really well. Luckily it was $30,000 because their product absolutely blew up and people were using the heck out of it. They just didn't do a good job optimizing their usage of it. And they didn't have, like triggers and limits and things like that. They just went, oh, how much could we use? It's, 0.00001 cent per megabyte or something, right? Or per, per cycle or per whatever. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. That's terrifying.
Yeah, it's a little terrifying. I've been looking at Back for App for doing some of this stuff. And they have a GraphQL interface for that as well.
Nice. You could probably take some of my awful code and make it work with that.
The GraphQL stuff. That was great to see that, because I have not done anything with GraphQL, but I remember reading about it in their documentation. They support GraphQL.
It's really cool. It's a really cool tech. One of the things that gets me excited about it is, and this is a thing Nolan knows very well, is that if you talk about tags in ColdFusion versus script, right? What's the thing that everyone always says is the reason they still use some tags, right? CF query, dynamic queries using CF query every single time, because it sucks to build a dynamic query in you're like building a string and then you have to like dynamically build it and then you execute it, right? Like it's so much easier and more human readable if it's in tags. Well, I had when I first saw GraphQL, I thought, oh, they do this like that, like it's built into the language, the dynamic. Like when you filter, and I didn't show you this because it gets really complicated really, really fast, but as you're putting your tree in of what your query looks like, you can filter at any point. And it can be dynamic, like if this exists, then do this, or if this is more than this, do this, right? You can just do that right inside of it. And so at first I thought, oh, we should steal that. But then I thought, wait, no, we should have a GraphQL engine inside of CF just built in, and then that would solve the problem. But no one agrees with me yet. So we're looking into it.
You'll get there. That's very cool. In terms of some of the no-code or low-code projects, it seems like one of the issues is sort of bloat. You end up with a lot of this is certainly the problem with WordPress, and I love WordPress and have used it for years, but you end up with a lot of really bloated products with features that, you're going to choose this one option, but all the other 30 options are built into all the code that's getting downloaded every single time for everybody.
Yeah, it can. Well, and there's a little bit of difference between, using, because a lot of the value from a lot of these no codes are that it's front loaded on the development side. That's where the real value is. And then what you actually expose and people download or they use, often it's not even, there's no UI. Like you're creating endpoint to endpoint integrations, for example, right? And they're tight, they're performant, they're all in the cloud, generally speaking, right? So you don't really have that issue. What you do have, though, is the problem of, like 20 different frameworks being used in your company. Like you have a big enough company. This is a huge problem at Adobe. It drives everyone completely nuts that there's just, and we actually have filters where if you sign up for something with an Adobe email, it will filter through and be like, stop that. Don't sign up for that. We have someone who controls that. Please email them so they can get you an account. Like, don't sign up for a new account already, just because it's such a huge problem. Now, I will say, I would rather have bloat and weirdness and all of that outside of my core code base than I would inside of it, right? As long as it's secure and as long as it's performant for as long as it does the job that it needs to do. No code is not going to solve every problem. I always hear developers be, oh, it's going to be the end of us, right? Like same with automation. It's not, right? It's not. It's in addition. It's kind of like IDEs, right? Like, I mean, we've all coded in Notepad, but we don't like to code in Notepad. We like to code in cool things like Builder.
Yeah.
And
I literally have a meeting tomorrow with the team that built version 1 of their app in Airtable and Stacker, and they've reached critical density on that. We're like, we can't go any further with this. We need an actual custom app built. So it's time to, this got version 1 out the door quickly and brought the money in, but version 2 is going to have to be built for realsies with the database and JavaScript and all the stuff. So
cool.
Yeah, it'll get you far, but it doesn't cover. It's not going to put developers out of business. You're right. It's a tool in the box.
That is such a great example, Nolan, because that is a thing. Like people will come to me and they're like, oh, well, I need like a dev to help me, put my app out. And I'll be like, well, are you paying? Like, well, no, but you could have, like money that doesn't exist yet, right? But with a low code, no code, like you can figure that out yourself often. Like you can get a lot of it out the door without needing, a CS degree.
Yeah, this is a real company that's got 2 or 3 rounds of funding and are, doing things right now. And it got the company off the ground, and they got the app built with nobody technical in the building anywhere. They just knew enough Airtable and Stacker to figure out, well, we need a form that kind of looks like this with these fields, and here's the data we have to collect. Somebody throw that on a publicly available URL, and it's working. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, they're good. Which got them really, really far. They hit kind of the critical mass on that one, or the tipping point, if you will, or whatever. And
something I didn't mention about Airtable is a lot of really smart developers have created a lot of templates for all kind of things, like customer relationship management, contact managers, all kinds of really cool stuff is already there that you can just like take that template, and it's like guided development. It will just, get you most of the way there that you want to get to. So, and most of those are free. You can just apply them
Mark,
When
I
I
put a thing in the chat that said a great no-code website option is webflow.com. Have you done any work with that before, Mark?
I didn't. I did mention Webflow. That was one of the ones that came up as one of the as one of the like popular ones. I think, are those the guys that can actually output to mobile also? I thought one of those was one that had like an option to create mobile apps really easily with no code. Oh,
I don't think it's mobile apps. I think their websites can be fully responsive. I've used Webflow some,
responsive. Okay.
and
Cool.
it's great. I'm always looking for replacements for WordPress because I've become kind of frustrated with WordPress, and Webflow is kind of the most promising one to come around in a while.
Nice.
But it is their platform, so I mean, you can actually, if they do have a built-in database, so you can do like a CMS on their platform. But if you build a static website on their platform and you pay for it, you can actually export the HTML and CSS stuff. And then, so that's kind of interesting. But if you want to use their website for CMS, then you're kind of, on their platform, which is interesting. But, I don't know how no code it really is. My experience with Webflow is you have to know CSS pretty well in order to really build something unique in it. I mean, certainly they have plenty of templates and stuff that you can use, but you could kind of, whack at. But if you really want to build something that you designed in Webflow, the controls are all CSS controls. And if you don't know CSS, you're going to make a mess.
Well, the nice thing is like CSS, at least you're just learning CSS, right? Like to actually, like you'd have to learn like HTML, PHP, CSS, JavaScript, right? Like, and CSS, if you break it, it's fine, right? It's not such a big deal. You didn't just like delete the database or anything like that. Right, you don't have to compile it. Well, I guess if you had Sass, you can compile it, but it's not like C# or something like that, where there's like this long, like you go through 5 minutes of something just to have it crash. Right, you kind of know right away, oh, this is totally broken. But yeah, CSS is not easy. I saw that comment. It is not easy. And by the way, CSS3 and HTML5 are Turing complete. Thank you very much.
I think Marco's messing with us.
Triple snap in Z formation.
One of the things that I found out about like no code is that its greatest strength can also be like its Achilles heel, where it's so easy to iterate and experiment that sometimes you lack productivity because you just sit there and experiment and iterate. And the other thing is, as you get, as it was mentioned before, as you get to a certain level of complexity, copy and pasting code actually can be easier than copy and pasting nested nodes or whatever they use for their no code.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really good point. And eventually I think performance ends up kind of catching up to you too, right? Like not only is it difficult to scale just the design, but eventually you're just starting to pay so much money for just having developers. Like that's one thing about Airtable, as I mentioned earlier, $29 a month. Meh, all right. I mean, it's kind of a lot, but not like terrible. Except if you've got 10 developers, like that's kind of a lot a month.
A lot of money, yeah.
Right, and you could very easily get to that. That was something I ran into because I was gonna use the CMS, and when I realized, well, actually, every member of my team would actually have to have internal access to this so they could structure it correctly. I looked at the bill. I'm like, oh, there's no way. They're gonna let me in the building and then throw me out the window of the building.
You might get Notion again. I think you can get, if you want to share a thing, it's like closer to $5 or $7 a seat, something like that. So if you want to share a space, but for free, you can get the personal one for free, and then if you're an educator, you get like the professional single user one for free with the .edu email address, which is great, which gives you kind of less limits on things. And their API, they started releasing their API last summer, and it's been making steady progress. It's one of the Slack channels I watch, is the Notion Slack channel for their announcements and stuff about the API, because it's something I've just been kind of waiting for it to get to the right place. And I think it'd be a great sort of headless CMS kind of option for websites.
Sure. Yeah. And I should reiterate, by the way, that there is a free version of Airtable, and you can use it with multiple people. You can share things out. Like, it's very feature rich for free. But the big feature that you can't use in it is apps, except for this like weird blocks beta feature that you could use for free, which I just was like, I don't even want to try to figure this out. Like, forget it. And you'd never want to use a beta feature in production anyway. So if people want to go and just play with Airtable without adding the GraphQL component to it, that's totally free. You could do that. You can do that forever.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it sounds like they're really competing with Notion there on that stuff.
Yeah, I think so.
You had another comment in chat from somebody who's logged in anonymously. I can't tell who it is. Just says, on the topic of cheap cloud storage, while not intuitive, CloudKit is super nice and isn't locked on to the Apple platforms.
Oh, interesting.
CloudKit. I'm not familiar with CloudKit.
I'm not either. I will plus one, however, Notion. I've been using that for a few things over the last month or so and have been really enjoying it. I'm addicted to Notion. I need to play with their API more. Mostly I'm using it as a cloud-based note-taking app right now, and a way to like organize my thoughts on a variety of projects and just meetings I have with people and things. But even just for that, it's been fantastic. And I'm just using the free version.
Very cool. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I need to go and check to see if that is the thing that my wife is using. Because if it's not, I'll let you guys know what the one that she's using is, because it's pretty cool. Like they're actually pretty progressive there. Like they use a lot of they use an online whiteboarding app that's amazing. It's got like an infinite whiteboard basically, and you can just like you can set up all of your meetings in different places on it, and everyone can add things to it. And yeah, it's like super, super cool. Again, like it's kind of like a no code way of doing, like you're not really building an app, but you kind of are, because you can use it to build swim lanes for yourself, right? Like a Trello type of thing. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Austin mentioned that CloudKit is Apple backend. I was just loaded it up, and yeah, it's an Apple thing, but I'm sure that it's all accessible outside of Apple, which is what I think the other comment was about.
It does require sign in through Apple.
So you have to have an Apple ID to sign in.
That's what Austin said. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that.
I haven't looked at it before either.
So many fun things to check out now.
Yeah, it figures that Apple would.
Right. Productivity for the rest of the month out the window, courtesy of Mark's talk here tonight.
Oh yeah.
Sidebar conversations.
Yeah, don't get me started on the fun that I've been having with Character Animator.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, I saw one of the other evangelists built basically a puppet that can do motion capture, and added that to his Twitch stream. So now when you go to my Twitch stream, it's not a video of me, it's a little puppet of me going like live action motion capture.
That's awesome.
Which is super cool.
Does anyone else have other questions or comments for Mark while he's here? We're getting kind of close to the end of the talk here. Anything puppet related or not puppet related?
This might be off topic, but do you know, well, it's not called Medium anymore. I think it's called Substance Modeler.
Yeah.
Any idea on when that's going to be released?
Substance is out. Do you have
the modeler?
I thought they did. Do you have Creative Cloud?
I thought it's in beta.
You might be right. So funny you should mention that. I actually I decided over the holiday break to try and learn Substance and failed utterly. And the other day I was in a big employee meeting with 11,000 of my closest friends at Adobe, and I asked for information on how to learn Substance, and I got like this stack. So speaking of like no headroom for anything other than learning, that's what I'm going to be learning for the next like 3 weeks. So I can look into that. I thought I saw someone using Substance Modeler in a demo, and I don't remember them saying it was.
I'm seeing Substance 3D Painter, Substance 3D Sampler, Substance 3D Designer, and Substance 3D Stager. I don't know if any of those or all of those are related to.
They're related, but those are all the different those are all in their workflow tools, right? So they're like Stager will stage your models, Painter will paint and texture them. So yeah, let's see.
Modeler is it used to be called Oculus Medium. It was a 3D modeling program for the VR, and Adobe bought it.
Oh, interesting. I've heard there's been some whispers in the hallways about some VR metaverse stuff, but like everybody's talking about VR metaverse stuff. But I wonder if that's related to that. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't know. It's not in my business unit. That's like the super cool business unit, like the Creative Cloud 3D folks and the Photoshop folks. Like they don't talk to us ColdFusion people, right? They do. They're sweet, but I don't hear much outside of the employee meetings, and they didn't mention that, unfortunately. So
yeah, it's cool. I figure it's off topic, so anyway,
it's all good.
I just figured I'd ask.
It's all good. But yeah, no, I'm curious about it now too, because that might be why I was having so much trouble learning Substance stuff. Like, how do I create a model? What the heck?
Yeah, Substance is definitely one of those ones too, where if you can pick the brain of somebody that knows it or look over their shoulder, it helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Adobe apps, like in the Creative Suite, kind of are like that. Like the first time when I tried using XD, I couldn't do it. I couldn't figure it out. Like I was just like, oh, how do you do something in here? And I ended up going to Max one year because I had a really awesome employer that sent me, and 3 classes in, I figured it out. It took me 3 classes to really like grasp. Aha! I had this, like those aha moments when suddenly everything falls into place, and you're like, it's like looking at one of those 3D, like images where you have to cross your eyes, right? Oh, it's a ship, right? It was like that, but it took a long time. Adobe. Yes, no, this is Adobe Max in person, which unfortunately was not free. But yes, Max is free, and so is Adobe Summit, which is coming up in March, by the way. And also, by the way, just to toot my own horn here, next week, I want to say Thursday at 10 a.m., I think. If you go to coldfusion.adobe.com/webinars, I think is where it'll be listed. I'm doing a webinar, and I'm talking about how to interact with an NFT, exciting, an NFT marketplace using ColdFusion. So it's basically more API stuff, but I'm going to be kind of diving into OpenSea's API. So, love them or hate them, NFTs are here. I keep hearing everybody asking questions like, how does ColdFusion fit into the whole NFT? And I'm like, well, it kind of doesn't, but hey, why not? Maybe it does a little bit. You can build a site using it. So I'll be doing that next week, 10 a.m. Come and see me. It'll be awesome.